It is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, so segment 2 of our weekly show. And as promised, we're going to do a little bit something different in this conversation. A bit of South African therapy, shall we say. And no one better for that than freelance journalist, writer, hails from South Africa, lives in London, Dan Gallan. Welcome to the Final Word.
Thank you very much. My debut.
It is your debut, which is incongruous in many ways, given how often we speak and how often we follow your work and have cited your work on the show. But oftentimes with South Africa, we've had Neil Manthorpe come on and do a splendid job talking to us, but I wanted someone to sit next to me today. And I feel like your personality is well suited to this as well. Like it does feel like over the years, South Africa's fortunes hit different with you than it might do with some other journalists. Like you wear this stuff heavily. It cuts deep when it doesn't work out for the national team. I thought I might just start there, like why you think, from your perspective, this stuff means so much to you when, objectively, you sit as a dispassionate journalist in your day job.
Yeah. So I was born in 1988. I was, what does that make me? 4 years old when Mandela walked free. 5 in 95 when the Springboks won, and I was raised like so many of the born free generation, people who don't have memories of apartheid. I was sort of raised on the Kool-Aid of the rainbow-colored Kool-Aid of Nelson Mandela, that this country, this democracy was somehow a miracle, that it meant something, that we were special. You know, all countries tell themselves a story, but this story was one of hope and you know, glory from ruin, as it were. And it was so tied in with the sports teams. Mandela famously stood up in front of a crowd of black people wearing a Springbok cap, and he was booed. This is before the Springboks won the 95 World Cup, and he was seen as betraying his people, but he was saying, no, we need to get behind the sports team. And, you know, Hansie Cronje was almost handpicked to be a symbol by Mandela. In 1996, Bafana won the African Cup of Nations. Penny Haynes in 96 won the Olympic gold. So for me, the country, when I was forming my worldview, the country's standing on the world stage was so intrinsically tied to the sports teams. And even though I'm now in my mid-30s, I've got a child, I'm married, I should know better. There's something deep in me that is tugged whenever the sports team plays. And yet, I've made a career in sports journalism. So, and when I'm reporting on the Springboks or the Proteas, when they're rubbish, I have no qualm saying so. When last year in the World Cup, when Rassie Erasmus, the doyen of South African sport, said something that I thought was sexist and xenophobic, I called him out for it and I got belters for it on social media. But I have no problem separating my work from my passion. But when I'm not working, like I wasn't working on this Cricket World Cup final, I'm a fan, and I'm a passionate fan, and mad it when it's good, it's the best thing in the world, but when it's not good, like it was this weekend, it hurts still. Right.
So yeah, I find that interesting that there's a broader, I guess, wider cultural, socioeconomic thing going on with you, the country you were born into, that maybe for someone like me or people of my generation, I don't know, perhaps that we can divorce our emotions from the fortunes of the national sports teams. Although in saying that, you know, if I'm watching an Olympic final and as an Australian, I'll feel deeply invested. But maybe the teams we've been conditioned to watch do well, and South Africa not having enjoyed as much success, certainly at World Cups, and the baggage that the men's team have had as a consequence, and to an extent now the women's teams as well, right? The last couple of times they've made it to the elimination stage of tournaments, they've had big opportunities and haven't been able to sort of stick the landing. So do you think this all feeds into why Saturday was something that hurt and will probably hurt you for a long time?
Yeah, totally. I mean, on the socioeconomic thing, you know, Australia has a good standing on the world stage. I went and just watched an Australian band this weekend, almost as therapy after the game. Cat Empire, thank you for a great show. That really made Saturday help the medicine go down. Yeah, you know, there's also national insecurity at play. You know, the country doesn't work. You know, Rassie Erasmus, in a recent documentary, I know I keep talking about rugby here, but they're sort of tied in with each other.
Sure.
Said that the Springboks are the only thing that works in the country. And in a way, like, the sports teams are our best way of putting ourselves on the world stage. You know, we've got Tyler, who's won a gold. Trevor Noah hosts the show. Elon Musk, the less said about him, the better. But, you know, there's little pockets, but it's really in the sports arena where South Africans can kind of puff their chest out and kind of rid themselves of the colonial baggage, and, you know, our best can go against your best no matter what the value of the rand is. And I think that desire for victory and on the world stage kind of feeds into it. The Springboks win, the Proteas don't. So that those years of hurts, I mean, the rain in 92, Brian Lara in 96, and the drop back in 99, you know, on and on it goes. I've got a column coming out this week. I basically had the column written if South Africa had won, and I was going to talk, all of them was going to be all the big strokes about redemption and unity and Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu and Anna Donald and Lars Klooster the Knopf, rest easy, but they didn't win, and that's just sort of the continuing tale. And in a way, it's good discourse. It's an interesting conversation.
Yep.
But it sucks.
Yeah, no, it does. And my impression from afar, like by far, I mean, I was in London, I wasn't at the game, and I wasn't in South Africa, of course, was that you weren't the only one feeling this way. It felt like sometimes we get down on South African cricket, and you've spoken and written about this as well, and we might come to this later about direction of travel and Test cricket and the market forces pulling South African cricket away from, to be blunt, the national team, for the men at least, when it comes to franchise cricket. But it felt like people were really plugged into this. Like, this meant so much more than a World Cup final might to, say, England or Australia had they made the decider.
I think, in a way, the two teams whose countries wanted it the most were contesting the final. Obviously, India with their billions and their expectations and how they've draped themselves in Modi's nationalism and the flag of their country. That wasn't the same for South Africa. I don't think South Africa, the broader South Africans wanted this. 5,000 people braved the Highveld cold to go watch at the Wanderers. They set up a free fan park. But if a free fan park is attracting 5,000 people at the home of South African cricket, those aren't huge numbers, right? So, but I think for the South African cricket fans, of which there are many, I think they really, really wanted it. So I wouldn't go. So I'd be cautious to say that the country needed it. I mean, the country's going through a cabinet reshuffle. The front page is all dominated with politics right now, and I think they've announced their cabinet today. So there's broad issues going on. But I think for the South African cricket fans who have been with the side since, 92 predates South Africa. 1992 they were still playing under the old South African flag. So this hurt is older than the country in many ways. So I texted a couple of mates afterwards, and my phone was blowing up after the game. Like, my dad asked me if I was okay. This is sort of like the kind of discourse, is like someone had died almost. And a few people said to me, I needed this, and in a way I felt like I needed it as well. I wanted it, but kind of like in the deeper part of me, I feel like I did need this. I did need to like just feel that my team, my guys could do something. And I'm older than a lot of them. I'm older than most of them, actually. Probably all of them, actually. I think Miller's the oldest and he's 35, so I'm older than all of them.
That's a confronting moment in life, isn't it, when you're older than every professional cricketer?
The worst.
I'm a bit older than you. I've already got that.
Exactly. When you're interviewing 20-year-old millionaires. I feel like I did need this, and I feel like a lot of people did as well.
I wonder whether this might be the start of something, though. To be generous, the SA20 is where so much of the emphasis lies in South African cricket now. A month-long jamboree, a T20 hyperinflated competition, and by that I mean the wages compared to what people are earning in normal South African cricket, the national contracts and so on. Whether extra exposure to world-class talent in your country every year might mean that in 2 years' time or 4 years' time or 6 years' time, the South African team might be just as good as this, or indeed better than this, or maybe better balanced. With Geoff and I, and Daniel and I have spoken about how there were some challenges that South Africa had throughout the tournament, some risks they absorbed, I suppose, in the way they set up the team. But this could be, rather than like the end of an era, knowing that there'll be a bit of a transition now, as it always is after a World Cup, that this might be a bit of a platform.
100%. And the good thing about cricket is that there's a World Cup every other year. So the opportunity for something else, I said Miller's 35, but he could play the next T20 World Cup in a few years' time. So, you think of Bartman, apart from one over where he couldn't hit the deck against England, he had a great tournament. Yeah. He's a product of the SA20. Clarkson has come on as a consequence of that. He's now probably the most destructive hitter against spin in the world. You mentioned Maxwell, probably those two.
Yeah, those two, right.
When they get the wind behind them, no one can bowl to them.
Yeah.
Miller's come on. Markram's captaincy has come on as a consequence. Janssen, yes, and he's probably batting one position higher, but he'll probably bat there for his franchise. And who knows, he's got the levers if he can just hit the ball more, because if he could just middle the ball more, he may prove us wrong, and he could be a number 7 player. So, the SA20 has been fantastic. The one thing we're not talking about, we haven't spoken about yet, is the lack of transformation. Now, the SA20 isn't bound by selection targets along racial lines, and this was the first World Cup that the coach, Rod Walter, wasn't forced to select along racial lines.
Why was the change? All the time I followed South African cricket, there's been the importance of the quota.
So the SA20 isn't run by CSA.
But I mean, this tournament.
Like for this tournament.
Yeah.
So there was a director from Enoch Nkwe who I spoke to recently. Got a piece coming out of them for Wisdom Mag about the lack of transformation. Why 30 years after democracy we're still having this conversation? And he just said, look, we just need to get over the line. We just need to win. And he's not saying that he doesn't think that a transformed team is inherently not a good team, but he just said for this purpose, let's just select our best team, whatever the coach thinks is the best team, and we'll move forward from there. So, yeah, they got so close. So this will both be ammunition for the people to say, well, you didn't transform and you still didn't win. We might, if we're not going to win, we might as well be transformed.
Yeah.
But then it's also ammunition for people that say, well, we made our first ever final. Look what happens when we aren't bound by selection targets. So that's a discourse that I think will kind of bubble in the background still.
Now we've reached this topic, we may as well go into it in a bit of depth because we've spoken about this in other forums before. But why those transformation quota targets are still relevant in 2024? Just give a sense to our listeners as to why, 3 decades on from the 1994 elections, that is still important to South African cricket.
I think it's important for South African cricket because 80% of the South African population is white, and 85% or 80% of the cricket team is white.
Yeah,
it's not a case of they almost meeting a representative team. It's so wild in the other direction, right? And you've got one black African in Kagiso Rabada in the main squad. Lungi Ngidi was a travelling reserve, and I think that Kwakwaya was also a travelling reserve. I might be mistaken, but anyway, one guy in the main team is black African in a country that is 80% black African. And whether we like it or not, and South African listeners might roll their eyes and might switch off, but it is important because of our history, because of the ruin of apartheid, where the economics of the country is still starkly divided along racial lines. Where you've been to Cape Town, you land in Cape Town, and you go to the waterfront, and it's lovely, and you stay in a nice hotel, but you have to drive through, frankly, poverty, right? And that is cut along racial lines. And the ineptitude of the government to sort this out has filtered down into the school systems, which are the feeders for the elite sports teams. And in sport like cricket, where you need pitches and bats, and we all know the story about how expensive cricket is. All countries go through this class divided cricket. When it's cut along racial lines in South Africa, it has that extra layer of importance, relevance, I would say. So, yeah, it's important. But as Enoch Nkwe said, the Springboks were afforded the 95 victory, right? They had this winning base to stand on. What if Alan Donald didn't drop his bat and they won that 99 World Cup? What if it didn't rain or there was a different system and South Africa got over the line at 92 and had this foundation of winning? Then you can maybe transform with more buy-in from supporters. But because the Proteas haven't won, the people on either side of this debate are unsatisfied already.
And it feels like when it comes up, and maybe there's a broader conversation around the influence of former players. I know a number of years ago now, perhaps when we were there in 2018, possibly, this blew up around quotas, and a number of former players were stridently against it and happy to put their name to those types of quotes. And there was an inquiry, was there not, that CSA undertook about 3 years ago about
during lockdown,
about racism within South African cricket. So it's never far away from the boil.
No. I mean, Kevin Peterson left citing quotas. Simon Harmer in the past, when Colpacks were a thing, most players cited quotas. When Keaton Jennings hit a reverse sweep to bring up a ton, there was insinuation that he had somehow slipped through the cracks, and you didn't need to scratch too far below the surface to know kind of what people were saying. It was the color of his skin. So yeah, it's there. You go to South Africa and you talk anything that isn't. You talk anything. Everything is race in South Africa. The entire landscape, the prism that we analyze the country is colored by race. And if you see a black guy driving a BMW, there'll be someone who thinks, how did he get that BMW? You'll see a poor white person begging on the street, and you'll be like, well, how did that person land up in that? I'm not saying this is how I think. I'm saying this is how South Africans think. Every single thing is through the prism of race. So when South Africa fields a team where it's got one black African, Kesha Maharaj, who's considered Indian, Tobias Shamsi, similarly, Reza Hendricks, who's considered coloured. South Africans will know what I mean. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But the rest of the team is white. It matters, even though it shouldn't, because these are the best players. No one who made this team made the team because they didn't deserve it. This was South Africa's best team, and they went toe-to-toe with one of the best white ball sides ever assembled and almost won. You know, I tweeted straight after the result that I hope that they are immensely proud of themselves. They did the country proud, but there'll be some people in the background who will look at this to the prism of race.
I'm going to give you a little half volley on the game here, because I know you've got strong views about the way that it ended.
Yeah.
And the C word that always comes up around South African cricket. I think Daniel and I have probably done it to death yesterday, to be honest with you, in our second podcast after. So I don't want to spend all day talking about it, but how you interpreted the end of the game, the last 30 balls, maybe the last 24 balls, in relation to the decisions that were made before the game even started.
Okay, well, I'll start at the end. The decisions that were made before the game was started, I think what you might be alluding to is Janssen.
Oh yeah, just the structural stuff and how that fed in, and how that, and you compare that and you measure that against what they were facing, and the other instances where South Africa have bottled it or whatever. Whether this fits into that tradition or whether this is a little bit different.
The Telegraph ran a piece where this was saying that this is one of the greatest chokes of all time. Geoff, who I love as a person and as a journalist and as a commentator, called it a choke. I think it's lazy. I think it's short-sighted. I think it's slightly ignorant to call this a choke. People are calling it a choke because they were in a winning position, and then they didn't win. Right, that is sort of our broad definition of what a choke is. When you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They were up against, in my opinion, the greatest all-format bowler of all time, Jasper Brummer. Certainly he's in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They were chasing what would have been a record target at the ground and in a T20 World Cup final, thanks to one of the best batters of all time who had played a great innings. I know he faced 27 dot balls, but Kohli dragging them over the line. What did he make? The top score of 20 before this, or something like that. It was a great knock. I have no problem with Janssen being the team batting where he is. Janssen bowled 3 half volleys and went for 15 in the first over. He is devastating against right-handers. He could have, if he just dragged his length back, he could have easily gone through the gates of one of the openers and got them out. That could have happened,
as he did at other points.
As he did at other points, as he did against Afghanistan, as he done at other points in the tournament as well. So they Klaasen and Miller got themselves in a position to win because they took down the best spinners in the world. No one had done that, right? England capitulated against India's spinners. South Africa's didn't. So it was a great game of cricket that the better side won. I'm sympathetic to people who want to reach for the C word, choke, but in my opinion, it is. Yeah, I think it's lazy. If I'm honest,
I think I get it. I understand that journalism isn't sort of long form 5,000 word pieces all the time. A lot of the time, it is down to a soundbite or whatever it is, and it's easy to reach for that. But anyway, I think you've dealt with that fairly comprehensively. In terms of the this direction of travel question, I know that national contracts are a fraught thing when it comes to South Africa, and now players actively declining them. We've seen Quinton de Kock, who's now retired from international cricket. What is he, 32, 31, 32, whatever he is, ahead of his time. And we saw what he was capable of, certainly at last year's 50-over World Cup. Yes, a form slump since, but at moments in this tournament, it was still clear, indeed in the final for a time there, that he still has a role to play, even if he doesn't want to necessarily have one. And where South African cricket, where it might be in 5 years' time, I've painted a pretty horrible scenario on this podcast before where I genuinely don't think they'll be playing Test cricket in 5 years' time unless something changes. That's the caveat. Something might change, and I hope it does. But if it keeps going the way that it's going, there are enormous risk factors. I wonder whether, I know it's a different format, but I wonder whether, having enjoyed some success in the last 3 weeks, whether it might provide some pause for thought on that, and whether playing in that green shirt or playing with that green cap on their heads and playing for the country, whether there might be a way of reevaluating the importance of that compared to, strictly speaking, what's available on the T20 circuit.
I'm not positive that it will. I don't see, even if they won it, I don't see how a T20 or 50-over World Cup victory would necessarily translate to people wanting to play more Test cricket when the infrastructure back home isn't geared towards it. Players play 8 games of first-class cricket a season, if they're touring with the national team on T20 circuits or play T20 circuits, they're not playing red ball cricket. So it almost in a way like the West Indies, their decline compel talented cricketers to focus more on the T20 circuit, and they won what was it, two T20 World Cup, and they've challenged in the 50 overs as well. So, I kind of see it heading more in that direction. Word just on Quinton, word is that that this might be the last we see him. Nothing's been officially announced yet, but sort of the rumors on WhatsApp chats and
sure,
more people in the know is that.
Oh yeah, hasn't he formally? I thought he did.
Oh, has he? Oh, well,
no. I mean, I thought he said before the time. Maybe I misread.
Had he? Oh, okay.
It may well be the case that he hasn't, but more like he's indicated for a while now that he's finishing up. Right?
It feels like that's the end of Quinton, and yeah, I mean, one of South Africa's all-time greats. Frankly, he's certainly one of the most talented players that I've ever seen in any country. It'd be sad to see him go, but I think. I mean, even take Aiden Markram. You know, Aiden burst on the scene in 2018 when he made that when he made the 100 in
the Durban 100 was one of the better hundreds you'll see.
Right, and then against a team reeling from the Sandpaper Brigade in Johannesburg, he scored that 140, which is one of the that was a real like if Durban was coming of age, this was he announced himself as on the stage really. He's now a T20 player. He's got big biceps. He's a great fielder. He bowls those darts. He looks to give it a whack. He doesn't really move his feet as much. He's almost molded himself, not as a kind of an all-format guy like Kohli, but it's almost like he's decided, okay, I'm going to be a white ball player. And I kind of feel like that's the direction of travel for South African cricket, at least in the short term.
As in, just to be clear, you mean like players who are on the cusp of being able to play across the formats, that they will go, hang on a minute, if I just specialise a wee bit this way, it might safeguard my future. So, if you're a 20-year-old on the way through.
Geoff Brevis.
Good example, but maybe someone we don't know of yet who's playing 4-day cricket in South Africa and is trying to work out which path they go in. Bowler or batter, that they are increasingly going to see the T20 route as the one that is going to safeguard their future, and the draw to Test cricket won't be there.
I think there will still be enough people that will say that will say outwardly and will maybe feel in their heart that Test cricket is the pinnacle of the sport. But I think when people come down to it and have to make that decision, I think more talented youngsters will be compelled. I mean, we saw that survey that ESPN published, that Matt Rick published. Yeah. I think more talented youngsters, when push comes to shove, will think, okay, what's going to be best for me? What's going to be best for my family? But not just like, brass tacks. It's like, where am I going to have more success? Where am I going to play in front of crowds? Where am I going to feel more fulfilled as a cricketer? I think in South Africa, because of the way it's set up, it's going to be white ball.
Do you feel like administrators at CSA, and I know it's been a bit of a rotating carousel there at times, and it's hard to bed down exactly where the power lies, but do you think they feel like their long-form cricket is at risk, or do you think that do they acknowledge it's a problem, first of all?
They do, yeah.
They do, right, okay. And secondly, on top of that, do they care that it's a problem? I know that some administrators feel that, right, okay, we have challenges about the way the game's moving, but it's still in our interest to be overseeing an organisation that's profitable or close to profitable, so we'll suck it up and we'll do the thing that we're asked to do. Where do you think that the administrators of South Africa are at on those kinds of questions at the moment?
Exactly that. I think, like the players, this Test cricket holds a romanticism in South Africa, as it does anywhere in the world. The swinging red ball, a nice cover drive, the polite applause, the grafting 100, all of that. That means something to South Africans. But even when South Africa had sort of what I consider their last golden summer, which was that 2018 series, Markram series, when they had Bangladesh at home, then the Indians came, then Australia came. That was sort of the last great summer of South African Test cricket. The grounds weren't full, apart from Cape Town. The Wanderers wasn't packed. Durban wasn't packed. South Africans we'll bemoan the death of Test cricket in South Africa, but cricket fans haven't been knocking the door down, as it were.
Haven't voted with their feet.
No, haven't voted with their feet. That's a good way of putting it. Exactly. So the administrators will say, okay, we love Test cricket. You say you love Test cricket. The players want to play Test cricket, but it's dying on its arse, right? So we can hold on to our deals as much as we want, but we need the SA20. We have to kind of sell our soul is a little strong, but we have to kind of go to the Indian conglomerate to say, please, can you kind of bail us out of this mess? COVID obviously didn't help. The Rand doesn't help. The fact that we're out of the so-called Big Three doesn't help. But yeah, I mean, pragmatism is sort of starting to win. And hey, you know what? I think in the short term, if South Africa win that 2027 World Cup on home soil, happy days, right? So coming back to like what we need, South African cricket also, in order to save Test cricket, I think the whole ecosystem in South African cricket needs a win. They need a World Cup victory, and then we can say, okay, we got this World Cup victory. What does the future look like? But until we get that monkey off the back, it's always going to be sort of kind of, playing the short-term game.
And it may well be the women win a trophy before the men win a trophy. And I know they haven't had a great week. I appreciate they haven't had a great week in their Test match against India, and that we've already dealt with that in the first part of the show in terms of what happened in that fixture. But the South African women, I mean, as long-term listeners to this show will know, I'm vaguely obsessed with the progress of that team and would love to see them win something. I think they're such a capable, talented group, and the investments that have been made and all the rest of it. But yeah, there is in the women's team a group who have gone from being well outside. You use the big three term. There used to be the big three in women's cricket: Australia, England, New Zealand. Now that doesn't exist anymore because New Zealand are well away from it. But they're in that next tier, genuinely pushing and making global finals.
I mean, the golden generation has sort of come and gone, and there's a new crop coming through.
Yeah.
I mean, Laura Urthboy might be in my opinion, the best pound for pound South African batter in the world. She's certainly up there in terms of one of the best batters in the world. She got a great ton list recently. Sine Lewis has almost sort of been more than the sum of her parts. I mean, like, I love it a bit. So I think she was a struggling captain. I'm glad to see her not be captain anymore. But it's sort of a team that kind of they remind me of like when Jaya Wardner and Sangakkara were sort of holding the Sri Lankan men's side together. It's a team that sort of past it's the golden era sort of lost its hue. But yeah, new coach, new developments, making the final on home soil definitely brought them to the fore. But I don't think they have the wider support the way the Australian women's team and England women's team do. They don't really sell out regular games outside of tournaments. But hey, strength to strength, more Test cricket, the better for them. I just kind of I want to see them kind of develop a little more before I make a judgment on them.
And in closing, scheduling. I mean, I know that the FTP is pretty grim when it comes to South Africa and the number of Test matches being hosted, which is fuck all compared to what it should be. Really, this is the plague, the curse of the 2 Test match series has been felt no more than it has been in South Africa. I guess the minimum standard is being cleared, but that's all. There's no more ambition than the minimum, it seems, at the moment. Got to feel for someone like Akisa Rabada, right? Like, look at his record overall at Test level. Anrich Nortje is the other one who you look at when he does play Test cricket, and you wonder whether, if with more opportunities, he could be seen as a great of that format too, although he's a different kettle of fish to Rabada, who already probably is.
Yeah.
Look at his breakdown across 8 or 9 years as a Test player. Where do they go? Especially Rabada. Does he just drift off into the wilderness of T20 cricket and, still plays for South Africa when called upon, but owing to the lack of cricket, the lack of Test cricket, that becomes less of a priority and he reorients his game to short form stuff? It would seem so wrong if it did play it that way.
I think Rabada, if there's a Test match and he's available, not with the debacle of the tour of New Zealand recently.
Oh yeah.
Where the mess up in scheduling meant that they weren't available. Unless something like that happens, I think Rabada would play every Test that he can.
Yeah.
I think they all will play. I think this group will play every Test that we can. Just going back to kind of picking up from the earlier question, I think when I said that some players would put all their eggs in. I mean, David Miller is desperate to play a Test match. I mean, the fact that he's never played a Test match, I think, is criminal. He could have been a Bairstow type player for South Africa. If you want to think of how baseball has changed the game, South Africa. Can you imagine Klaasen at 5 and Miller at 6 or something like that in the South African Test order? Who knows? Maybe they don't have the technique for it, but I'd like to see them give it a go. And the fact that they're only playing 2 Tests a series, fucking why not throw a caution to it? Just reinvent themselves. And you know what? If they go out and they score 400 a day, and then Rabada runs in with an actual score behind him and he knocks teams over, then other boards might be like, hey, South African Cricket South Africa, you're a great side, you're a blockbuster, we'll give you a 3rd Test. So I think South African cricket needs to help itself now. They need to say, we can't just go about playing the same sort of cricket, doing the same sort of thing, bemoan. I've shaken my fist at untold number of clouds. I've worn my insecurity about not being part of the big three. We've had this conversation before about how, and kind of going back to where I feel it. Like I've bemoaned the state of the world for a long time, but I do think a lot of the onus needs to go to South Africa, and they need to take responsibility and say, we need to reinvent our testing, and we need to get bums on seats. We need to make people feel excited about the team. we're now behind this white ball side. Tabraiz Shamsi is a great ambassador for the side. Miller, Klaassen, even Kesha Maharaj, how he's reinvented himself as a white ball bowler. I think that on the test side, another cultural revolution needs to take place, and they need to take responsibility. Or you know what? As I said for a Guardian column last year, let it just die on its ass, right? Just stop stringing us along as fans. If we're gonna kill Test cricket in South Africa, then let's just fucking kill it, right? If you're not going to kill it, and if you say it's important, and all the administrators and players say it's important, well then do something about it. Because I think that's where the frustration comes.
Yeah, let's hope they do. Love your passion, love your patriotism as well, as distinct from nationalism, and the pride that you feel in the country of your birth. Dan Gallan, thanks for joining us on The Final Word and giving us a nice comprehensive sense of where South African cricket is today.
Cheers, mate.